Back in 2005, while they were working on the sitcom Nathan Barley, Chris Morris and Charlie Brooker came up with the idea for a cartoon politician. What if somebody put up an MP for an election, just like the band Gorillaz? What if somebody put up an animated mascot for election? And then, just thinking through the logistics of that was quite amusing. You know, the fact that suddenly, actually, you realize you've got all sorts of advantages over a real person. Because it's almost like a robot. It can never be wrong, really. It's like Bugs Bunny or something. You don't really care whether it's Mel Blanc or whoever took over Bugs Bunny's voice after Mel Blanc. You just like Bugs Bunny. So, it's a scandal-proof politician. And then, strangely, more recently, you think it's an advantage is it's not human, because politicians don't seem particularly normal anyway. That's sort of the problem, I think, isn't it? This later became the plot of an episode of Black Mirror called The Waldo Moment. In it, a comedian who plays a blue animated bear who satirizes politicians by entrapping them in a pretend children's program gets forced to run the character as a satirical candidate against a Tory in a parliamentary by-election, and becomes wildly popular after he loses his cool against the politicians during the hustings. The comedian has a crisis of confidence after the cute Labour candidate berates him, and he gets sidelined when he tries to sabotage the character for its destructive impact on public morality and the democratic process. His producer takes over managing Waldo. This was originally intended to be a sequel series to Nathan Barley, a series in which a failing journalist working for a puerile youth magazine called Sugar Ape pens a takedown of his peers called Rise of the Idiots, only to find the very people he is lampooning hold him up as a counterculture prophet, and he gets carried away by a wave of nightmarish irony as his career and dignity fall to pieces.
The Rise of the Idiots by Dan Ashcroft. Once the idiots were just the fools gawping in through the windows. Now they've entered the building. You can hear them everywhere. Yeah. They use the word cool. It is their favourite word. The idiot doesn't think about what it is saying. Thinking is rubbish, and rubbish isn't cool. Stuff and shit is cool.
Oh, Ashcroft.
The idiots are self-regarding consumer slaves, oblivious to the paradox of their uniform individuality. They sculpt their hair to casual perfection. They wear their waistbands below their balls. They babble into handheld twit machines about that cool email of the woman being bombed by a wolf. Their cool friend made it. He's an idiot too. Welcome to the age of stupidity. Hail the rise of the idiots.
Dan Ashcroft! Rise of the idiots. Awesome fucking opinions, dude.
Yeah, well plastic.
Yeah. Later.
Keep it foolish.
Waldo was supposed to be a commentary on Donald Trump and Boris Johnson, since Brooker is a London progressive married to the sister of a Labour politician. But in reality, dystopian hypotheses generally never arrive in right-wing wrapping paper, but under fairly middle-of-the-road, centre-left political vehicles. The world of V for Vendetta, for example, in which Islam, homosexuality and left-wing literature is banned under a fascist police state, festooned in CCTV cameras, was written just a decade before the same police state was delivered under a precisely inverted ideological formula by Tony Blair. Dan Ashcroft, or Jamie as his character became named in the sequel, ends up on the street at the end of The Waldo Moment, as jackbooted policemen drag him away against the backdrop of a commercialized dystopian future. And much like The Waldo Moment, we now get to see the establishment foaming at the mouth for a character running in a parliamentary by-election against a Tory. Binface is a left-wing BBC comedy writer called John David Harvey, who was educated at Oxford and who has worked on smug, vulgar establishmentarian outlets like The Thick of It, Have I Got News for You, and John Oliver's Little Blue State propaganda show. Who has Binface run against? Well, in 2017, Theresa May in Maidenhead. In 2019, Uxbridge and South Ruislip against Boris Johnson. In 2021, he took part in the London mayoral election to promote a platform which, quote, marries fiscal responsibility, social awareness, and not being an anti-vaccine nutjob. 2023, after Johnson resigned, he ran in the subsequent by-election in his old seat, Uxbridge and South Ruislip. In 2024, he ran in the London mayoral election on a campaign to raise awareness of the affordable housing crisis, his one serious policy amid the joke ones. He also ran against Rishi Sunak in Richmond and Northallerton in 2024. His first left-wing target, Andy Burnham, was lampooned for running while Mayor of Manchester. Quote, I believe elected mayors should serve out their terms before they're eligible to stand for Parliament. John buys into the vain and self-serving illusion that the, quote, centre is a flexible middle way, instead of simply being the perspective of the establishment, against which any criticism is siloed into various opposing factions. From an interview he did with Amy Hoggart a couple years ago, quote, there were times when the hard-left Corbyn era, when the Labour Party itself had moved further towards 100. Therefore, I reacted against that because that felt to me like the wrong way. Now, of course, Labour is a very centrist government. You might say 0 on your scale. So there are parts of me going, burn it down, burn it all down. The one thing I will say is that I don't like the idea of centrist being a derogatory word. But now the irony is doubled. The opponent of Waldo Binface is now one of the politicians Waldo was invented to satirize in the first place, what Nima Parvini has referred to as Sloppialism. These people are nominally right-wing candidates who play to the crowd by appealing to the neglected grievances they have against the system and the more vulgar of their libidinal urges, but deliver little of substance. While Farage achieved Brexit, it was the establishment who delivered it, and crippled every policy aim the nationalist movement actually wanted, led by none other than Boris Johnson, a nominally right-wing bullshitter who actually believes in open borders and unconstrained liberalism. Trump likewise has eventually attained a reputation for failing to deliver on the substantial and revolutionary promises his base heard in his campaigns, and like Waldo, he has become a vector for extraordinary and planetary scale corruption. They all rely on the same pantomime that the whole media landscape buys into their character, their persona. So long as these crass, superficial, vain and commercial opportunists are seen as dangerous right-wing politicians, they can gain real right-wing votes and galvanize real left-wing opposition. But nowhere is the pantomime more transparent than here in Clacton-on-Sea. The entire establishment politely acts as if it is Count Binface instead of John David Harvey sitting opposite them. Why? Well, because much like in Ali G, Have I Got News for You, and John Oliver's late-night impotent squeak, this is an establishment pantomime, one in which the characters sneer at the unenlightened and mock the plebs. This is a pantomime within a pantomime. In order to mock and marginalize the people's aspirations, one must mock the man who pretends to stand for them, Nigel Farage. And Farage is a great object of mockery, to be sure, but he is not the people's champion. In point of fact, he has weeded out every single anti-establishment voice in his party, with corporate manager Richard Tice inviting a state intelligence department to filter his candidates for them. It is clear that Farage is trying to avoid addressing his donations from a foreign billionaire, and is holding the by-election as a way to renew his mandate. But the establishment doesn't have the confidence to field opposition candidates, instead letting John Harvey run as a sort of protest vote plebiscite against Farage. Certainly, Farage's administration wouldn't do anything radical, they've made sure of that, but Reform isn't a deep establishment party either. The rise of Farage could be a golden opportunity to co-opt populist energy and get a fresh buy-in from the public without changing direction on key policies, but instead they simply cannot keep their disdain for the electorate caged. For decades, the Conservatives have been to the left of the average voter on every single policy, despite being the most right-wing party in the establishment. And the idea of tempering even the most meaningless of ideological positions seems to be a step too far for them. Nobody is truly scared of Nigel Farage because he is a hollow man. He won't change a thing. His team are Boris-era Tory apparatchiks. His party is overseen by civil service, and his policies are for sale. Trump was scary for a while because he was a genuine outsider, and few understood at the beginning just to what degree his policies were up for auction. Same goes for Mahmoud Mamdani, whose provocative Muslim socialist Candyman persona promises a great deal, but isn't really putting anything radical on the table, and involved making peace with the New York establishment to keep them from sabotaging his campaign. In South Africa, we have Helen Zille, who plays Margaret Thatcher in public to keep the minority voters on side while nursing a 14-year plan to merge with the ANC, and even making her party vote for their anti-white race laws in Parliament in 2014. Who has remained scary? Rupert Lowe and Jeremy Corbyn. Corbyn's career is dead, so this is perhaps an outdated observation, but when he was at his peak, he was shocking because he was sincere and genuinely believed in changing Britain. He wanted to nationalise 10% of all the major corporations. Now that's really scary. Lowe wanted to stop the immigration, scrap the Blairite state, cut the boomers off the teat and send the migrants home. That's somewhat scary, but they have Farage as a buffer so long. So, not much to worry about yet. In South Africa, Julius Malema is treated as a great bugbear, but the establishment secretly loves him, and they get on well at social functions. He defends LGBT and open borders, both unpopular policies keeping him at a meagre 10%, and useful for undermining the ANC amongst a segment of the youth vote. But Jacob Zuma, who pushes tribal chauvinism, full-scale nationalization of industry and an end to immigration, who wants to replace the oligarchs who fund all the other parties in the country. Well, that's popular, and it's scary. Farage, well, it's not clear that he wants much of anything besides his face on television. In reality, almost everyone in politics is Count Binface, and everyone in the media keeps playing along. If Binface were interviewed as John David Harvey, he would lose the suspension of disbelief required for an emotional investment in the joke. No other political candidate is permitted to maintain their pantomime character uninterrupted. Ofcom would have a field day if Farage were lobbed generous and chummy softballs without a punch to his Judy. While it's not exactly a secret who he is, the common establishment desire to play this game with Count Binface should illustrate something. We all know this is a silly game, and only a childish fool would try ideas other than the status quo. But in this attitude is revealed the broader game. That we have all agreed that this politics business is all in good fun. Everyone knows that the promise for change is a fraud, and that what you are absolutely forbidden to do is sincerely attempt to make a change. The strange part of this whole charade is that for the first time, Harvey is being treated as a popular, proper candidate. And the possibility of him defeating the Guy Fawkes Day effigy of right-wing populism is being broadly treated as a real possibility. There's one final observation worth making here. In a recent LBC interview, Harvey made the comment that all other candidates are rubbish, but in a rather particular way. Taking this as the face of the opposition, what is this saying? That we need an establishment, status quo politician who nevertheless manages to capture the heart and soul of the electorate. In other words, Tony Blair. But Binface is really having a moment, as otherwise opposed Farage is already looking ridiculous enough trying to renew his mandate without a challenger. But on the off chance that he actually defeats and punctures the reputation of Nigel Farage, Harvey may find himself in a Black Mirror horror of his own making. That of an ascendant Rupert Lowe, as he is forced to debate him without the comedy mask in the House of Commons over serious issues like national finances and the rape gangs.
You won't win either, but I was at least attempting to represent... Well, I don't know, not just bollocks to everything. If you were preaching revolution, well, that'd be something, but you're not, because that would require courage and a mindset. And what have you got? Who are you?